Hello students, teachers, parents, history nerds. Hello everybody and welcome to Nutshelled History, where we lay out the facts, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We continue with our Early America series by looking at a constitution for the United States. This is the full topic, so this one is longer than the individual lessons. Check the description down below for a fill-in-the-blanks and/or multiple-choice comprehension worksheet that goes along with this video. I just ask that you like and subscribe. I apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. I do my best. Alright now, let's go. A weak confederation. After declaring independence, the former colonies had to figure out how to run their own show, so they started writing new state constitutions. A constitution is basically a government's instruction manual, except politicians actually have to follow it in theory. Most states set up a government with a legislature, a bunch of people elected to argue about laws, and an executive, a governor whose job was to make sure those laws weren't completely ignored. Voting rights? Well, if you were a white man over 21 and owned some land, congratulations, you got a say. Women and African Americans, however, were left out because, well, history has a bad habit of being unfair. Virginia even got fancy and was the first to include a Bill of Rights, listing freedoms the government promised to respect, again, in theory. Meanwhile, the Continental Congress was busy crafting the Articles of Confederation in 1777, a plan that created a national government but kept most of the power with the states. Congress could make laws, sign treaties, coin money, and even run a post office, because mail was very important back then. What could it not do? Collect taxes, which meant it had no money, which meant it couldn't pay debts, which meant the economy was a bit of a disaster. States didn't even want to use the national currency, and when they started arguing over land west of the Appalachians, Congress just shrugged and hoped for the best. The Confederation also lacked an executive branch, so it had not power to enforce any laws that they did make. Still, Congress did manage to pass two useful laws. The Land Ordinance of 1785 divided Western lands into neat little squares, because nothing says orderly expansion like a giant game of grid-based real estate. Each township had 36 sections, with one section set aside for schools, because the founders wisely realized that democracy works better when people can read. Then came the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, which set up a government for the Northwest Territory, guaranteed settlers basic rights, and created a path for new states to join the Union. Eventually, this led to 5 new states, because America never turns down the chance to make the map more interesting. But not everything was sunshine and well-planned land divisions. The 1780s economy was about as stable as a 3-legged chair. Farmers in Massachusetts were losing their land because they couldn't pay taxes, and they were not happy about it. Enter Shays' Rebellion, a group of frustrated farmers who decided to protest by rising up against the state. The rebellion was put down, but it sent a loud and clear message. This government thing needed some serious upgrades. And thus, America took its first steps toward realizing that maybe a stronger national government wasn't such a bad idea after all. Drafting a constitution. In 1787, a bunch of big-thinking, wig-wearing delegates gathered in Philadelphia for the Constitutional Convention. 55 of them showed up from 12 states, except Rhode Island, which basically said, "Nah, we're good." Among these delegates were big names like Ben Franklin, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams. Basically, the Founding Fathers' all-star team. Their goal? Create a government strong enough to function, but not so strong that it felt like King George had just changed his name to Uncle Sam. At first, they were supposed to fix the Articles of Confederation, but after taking a good look at them, they decided it was like trying to patch up a sinking ship with duct tape. So they scrapped it and started from scratch. 2 plans, 1 government. James Madison and Edmund Randolph came in hot with the Virginia Plan, a proposal for a strong central government with 3 branches. Judicial, a system of courts to settle disputes and create jobs for future lawyers. Executive, 1 chief executive to carry out the laws, which sounded a little like a king, but they swore it wasn't. Legislative, Congress, but now with 2 houses, with representation based on population. Good news for big states, bad news for small ones. Small states, realizing this plan would turn them into background characters, panicked and came up with their own idea, the New Jersey Plan. It also had 3 branches, but with a single House Congress where all states had equal representation. This plan basically said, size doesn't matter. The Great Compromise, because nobody likes a stalemate. Enter Roger Sherman from Connecticut, who saved the day with a brilliant compromise. The House of Representatives would be based on population. Yay, big states. The Senate would have 2 senators per state. Yay, small states. This genius plan was called the Great Compromise because the barely avoided a huge fight compromise was too long. The slavery debate, because things weren't awkward enough then. Came the next big disagreement, slavery. Southern states wanted enslaved people to count toward their population, more people, more power in the House. Northern states called them out. Wait, so they're property when it's convenient, but people when it helps your representation? Pick a lane. The solution? The 3/5 compromise. Each enslaved person would count as 3/5 of a person for representation, which was as morally awful as it sounds. The debate didn't stop there. Northern delegates wanted to ban the slave trade, but the South wasn't having it. The compromise? Congress wouldn't touch the slave trade for 20 years, because apparently pushing problems down the road is a time-honored tradition. Signing the Constitution, some assembly required. By September 1787, the delegates had hammered out the Constitution. Most of them signed it, but 3 refused, worried that this new government might get too powerful. They weren't entirely wrong. Now it was up to the states to ratify, approve it. Each state held a convention, and once 9 states gave it a thumbs up, boom, America officially had a government. And just like that, the United States had a brand new rule book, one that we're still arguing about today. Ideas that influenced the Constitution. When drafting the Constitution, the framers didn't just wing it. They borrowed ideas from some of history's greatest hits. Think of it as the ultimate mashup of ancient wisdom, European documents, and a few American traditions, some better than others. Rome, the original republic, influencers. The framers were huge fans of the ancient Roman Republic. You know, before the whole empire thing and all the backstabbing, literally in Caesar's case. They admired how Roman citizens put the good of the community first, at least when they weren't busy conquering their neighbors. They also knew that for a republic to work, its citizens needed to be educated, because an uninformed voter is basically just flipping a coin in the ballot box. England, the land of useful documents and angry nobles. They also took notes from England, which had already gone through its own "maybe kings shouldn't have unlimited power" phase. In 1215, King John was politely forced to sign the Magna Carta, which guaranteed rights to English nobles, established private property rights, and most importantly, declared that even the king had to follow the law, a shocking concept at the time. A few centuries later, England doubled down on citizen rights with the English Bill of Rights, which took things up a notch by guaranteeing trial by jury and other freedoms. Basically, England was the annoying older sibling saying, "We made these mistakes first, learn from us." America, we were already doing some of this anyway. The framers didn't just rely on European influences, they also looked at American traditions. Self-government wasn't new to the colonies. New England town meetings had long been giving citizens a direct say in local laws, kind of like a very loud, very opinionated PTA meeting. Colonists were also used to having written government documents, unlike Britain's unwritten system, which often led to confusion, kind of like agreeing to a contract without reading the fine print. And of course, they had very strong opinions about how not to be ruled by a king. The not-so-great traditions. Of course, not everyone got a say in this new government. State voting and property laws still reflected colonial ideas about gender, race, and wealth. Women, they could own property until they got married, at which point everything magically became their husband's. How romantic. Also, no voting for them. Free African American men? Some states allowed them to vote, but only if they owned property, because apparently owning land made you more qualified to participate in democracy. The Enlightenment, where the framers found their favorite philosophers. The framers were also big fans of Enlightenment thinkers, particularly John Locke and Baron de Montesquieu. Locke declared that everyone has a natural right to life, liberty, and property, which definitely sounded better than life, monarchy, and taxes. Montesquieu introduced the idea of separation of powers, meaning government should be divided into three branches: legislative, executive, and judicial, so no single group could hoard all the power, a concept many politicians conveniently forget today. And just like that, the framers had all the inspiration they needed to create the Constitution, a document that would shape the future of the nation, be debated endlessly, and require more amendments than they probably anticipated. Federalists, Anti-Federalists, and the Bill of Rights. After the 1787 Constitutional Convention, the brand new Constitution was sent to the states for approval. What followed was one of the most intense political debates in U.S. history. Think less polite discussion and more Thanksgiving dinner argument about politics. Eventually, after much back and forth and the addition of the Bill of Rights, all the states gave the Constitution a thumbs up. Team Federalists, stronger government, please. The Federalists were all about a strong national government. Because, let's be honest, the Articles of Confederation had left things feeling more like a messy group project than a functioning country. Three key Federalist leaders, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison, teamed up to write the Federalist Papers, a series of 85 newspaper essays explaining why the Constitution was the best thing since sliced bread, if sliced bread had existed yet. Their main argument? The Union needed a government with actual authority, not just a bunch of states doing their own thing like independent nations. The Constitution, they promised, would create a powerful but balanced government that wouldn't trample on states' rights. Totally, guys, we promise. Team Anti-Federalists, not so fast. Not everyone was convinced. The Anti-Federalists, including Patrick Henry and George Mason, were deeply suspicious of the new Constitution. To them, it looked a little too much like a monarchy in disguise, especially with this whole president idea. Sure, George Washington would probably be great because, come on, he was George Washington. But what about the future? What if some power-hungry weirdo ended up in charge? Not that that would ever happen, right? Their biggest concern? The Constitution didn't list out individual rights. They had just fought a war to escape a king who ignored people's rights, and they weren't about to let that happen again. Their demand? A Bill of Rights, or no deal. Ratification, the great state-by-state showdown. For the Constitution to become official, at least 9 states had to ratify it. Delaware jumped in first, overachiever, approving it in December 1787. Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, and Connecticut quickly followed. Massachusetts took a little more convincing, but finally gave in by February 1788, followed by Maryland and South Carolina. Then, in June 1788, New Hampshire became the 9th state, officially making the Constitution a thing. Cue dramatic music. Eventually, the holdouts came around too, with Rhode Island dragging its feet until May 1790, when it finally gave up and said, fine, whatever. Time for a president. Now that the U.S. had a government, it needed a leader. In the first ever presidential election, George Washington was unanimously chosen as president, with John Adams as his VP. It helped that no one ran against them. The Bill of Rights, we told you so. During all the ratification drama, many states had said, okay, we'll approve this thing, but only if you add a Bill of Rights. So once Congress got to work, that became priority no. 1. In 1789, Congress passed 10 amendments protecting individual freedoms. By December 1791, enough states had ratified them, officially making them the Bill of Rights, a fancy name for things the government is not allowed to do. First Amendment protects freedom of speech, religion, and the press because no one likes being told what they can or can't say, or which newspapers they can't publish angry letters to. Third Amendment stops the government from forcing citizens to house soldiers because no one enjoys unexpected roommates. Sixth and Seventh Amendments guarantee the right to a trial by jury, so you don't end up at the mercy of just one judge who really wants to wrap things up before lunch. And just like that, the U.S. finally had a working government, a president, and a Bill of Rights to keep everything in check. Now all they had to do was figure out how to actually run the country, which, spoiler alert, would get complicated fast. Understanding the Constitution. The Constitution, the government's user manual. The preamble is the Constitution's opening statement, basically the mission statement of the United States. Think of it as the "We the People" version of an inspiring movie speech. The rest of the Constitution is broken into 7 sections called articles, which lay out how the government is supposed to work, because, as history has shown, winging it doesn't always end well. Article 1, Congress makes the laws, and debates them, and rewrites them, and debates them again. Article 2, the President enforces the laws, and vetoes them if they don't like them. Article 3, the Supreme Court interprets the laws, and occasionally tells everyone they've been doing it wrong. Article 4, states have to play nice and recognize each other's laws. No, you can't escape your speeding ticket by driving to another state. Article 5, here's how we changed the Constitution, because the framers knew we'd mess some things up. Article 6, the Constitution is the boss. No law can overrule it. Nice try, bad laws. Article 7, this is how the states approve the Constitution. In over 200 years, the Constitution has only been changed 27 times, which is impressive considering how often people argue about it. 7 key principles, the rules of the government game. The Constitution is built on 7 basic principles which keep things mostly functional. 1. Popular sovereignty. The people run the show. Government power comes from the citizens, at least in theory. 2. Limited government. The government only has the powers the Constitution gives it. No, Congress, you can't make a law banning pineapple pizza. 3. Separation of powers. The government is split into 3 branches, so no one gets too powerful or starts declaring themselves supreme ruler. 4. Checks and balances. Each branch can limit the power of the others. Basically, they babysit each other. 5. Federalism. Power is shared between the federal and state governments, like roommates splitting the bills, sometimes awkward, sometimes messy, but necessary. 6. Republicanism. Citizens elect representatives to make decisions, because having millions of people vote on every single law would be a logistical nightmare. 7. Individual rights. The Constitution protects freedoms like speech and fair trials, so you can complain about the government without getting thrown in jail. The 3 branches. Who does what? 1. Congress. The lawmakers. Article 1. Congress is in charge of making laws, because someone's got to do it. It's split into 2 parts. The Senate. Each state gets 2 senators, even tiny ones like Rhode Island. They serve 6-year terms and get to confirm Supreme Court justices and approve treaties. The House of Representatives. Representation is based on population. Wyoming. They serve 2-year terms, and their leader, the Speaker of the House, keeps things organized, or at least tries to. Congress also has some extra perks, like declaring war, collecting taxes, and establishing post offices, because mail is serious business. Laws start as bills and get debated, sometimes for so long that it feels like watching paint dry before they become official. Number 2, the President. The nation's CEO, Article 2. The President leads the executive branch and is responsible for enforcing laws and running the country. Some of their powers include vetoing bills. Congress, we worked so hard on this. President, no. Proposing laws, hey guys, let's try this instead. Granting pardons, you're forgiven, go forth and don't do it again. Appointing important officials, judges, cabinet members, and anyone else needed to keep things running. Negotiating treaties, let's be friends, or at least not enemies. Serving as commander-in-chief, the military's boss, but without a uniform. The president serves a 4-year term and can only be re-elected once, thanks to the 22nd Amendment. However, Americans don't elect the president directly, the Electoral College does. Each state gets electors based on its number of senators and representatives, and these electors vote for the president. Yes, it's confusing. No, we're not changing it anytime soon. Number 3. The Supreme Court, the ultimate referees, Article 3. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the land, basically the final boss of the judicial system. It was officially set up in 1789, and today it consists of 9 justices, 1 Chief Justice, and 8 Associate Justices. The President nominates justices, but Congress has to approve them, because no one wants a judge who thinks laws are just suggestions. They serve for life, which means some of them stick around for decades. Their biggest power? Judicial review, the ability to decide if laws or presidential actions are unconstitutional. AKA, nope, you can't do that. If someone disagrees with a court decision, they can appeal, meaning a higher court will review the case. But once the Supreme Court rules on something, that's final, unless a new law or amendment changes it. Good luck with that. Checks and balances, the no one gets too much power system. The framers were really worried about one person or branch getting too much power, so they built in checks and balances to keep things fair. The president can veto laws. Congress can override a veto with a 2/3 vote. Congress can impeach the president if they really mess up, looking at you, Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump. The Supreme Court can strike down laws that violate the Constitution. Basically, if one branch gets too power-hungry, the others can step in and say, not today. And that's the Constitution. It's been running the country for over 230 years, guiding everything from how laws are made to who gets to be president. It's been amended 27 times, debated endlessly, and occasionally misinterpreted by people who didn't actually read it. But at the end of the day, it's still the foundation of the US government, and proof that, while democracy isn't always perfect, it's definitely entertaining. Now go impress your history teacher with your knowledge. Federalism and amendments, the Constitution, now with a built-in upgrade system. The Founding Fathers knew that times would change. They may not have predicted TikTok, but they knew the world wouldn't stay the same forever. That's why they built a constitution that could adapt. The Bill of Rights, the first and most famous patch update. After writing the Constitution, some framers looked at the final draft and said, wait a minute, where's the part about people's rights? Instead of scrapping the whole thing, which would have been a paperwork nightmare, they fixed it by adding the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Luckily, Article 5 of the Constitution provided a way to make amendments, like a government-approved edit button. How to amend the Constitution? A surprisingly difficult task. There are two ways to propose an amendment. Congress can propose it, but they need a 2/3 vote from both the House and the Senate. And getting Congress to agree on anything is harder than choosing a restaurant with your friends. State legislatures can demand a national convention to propose an amendment. This has never actually happened, probably because no one can agree on where to hold the convention. After an amendment is proposed, it must be approved in one of two ways. 3/4 of state legislatures must say yes. 3/4 of special state conventions must approve it. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. This process can take years, which explains why only 27 amendments have made the cut since 1789. The Bill of Rights, because freedoms matter. The Bill of Rights wasn't just added for fun, it protects some of the most important freedoms Americans have, like freedom of speech, religion, and the press. First Amendment, speak your mind, worship as you please, and print whatever your editor lets you. Protection from cruel and unusual punishment. Eighth Amendment, no, you can't be sentenced to 10 years of listening to elevator music. Rights beyond the Bill of Rights. Ninth Amendment, just because a right isn't listed doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The Constitution, still getting updates. The Constitution is a living document, which means it grows and changes with the times. Some of the biggest updates include 13th Amendment, no more slavery, period. 19th Amendment, women finally get the right to vote. 26th Amendment, voting age lowered to 18, because if you're old enough to be drafted, you're old enough to vote. Federalism, who's in charge of what? According to the 10th Amendment, powers not given to the federal government belong to the states, or the people, depending on who you ask. This is the foundation of federalism, which means the states and the national government share power. Each of the 50 states has its own constitution, which follows the US Constitution. No state can just decide to ignore it. Has 3 branches of government, just like the federal system, can be amended so they can adjust to changes too. Local government, the unsung heroes of daily life. The US Constitution doesn't mention local government, rude, but it plays a huge role in people's lives. Local governments handle things like education. Yes, they decide how much math you have to take. Public safety, police, firefighters, and emergency services. Trash collection, because no one wants to live in a garbage pile. Road maintenance, hello, pothole repairs. Some cities even provide parks, recreation centers, and snow removal. So whether you're enjoying a baseball game or cursing while shoveling your driveway, thank your local government. The takeaway. The Constitution was built to last, but it wasn't built to be static. Thanks to the amendment process, we've been able to adapt and improve, slowly but surely. From protecting freedoms to fixing unfair laws, the ability to change the Constitution is what keeps it relevant, even after more than 230 years. Now, go ace that history quiz. Citizens' rights and responsibilities. So you want to be a citizen? Here's the scoop. Being a citizen means you get to enjoy all the perks of a country, like voting, legal protections, and the right to complain about taxes. In the US, you can become a citizen in one of 4 ways. Be born here, have a parent who's a US citizen, go through naturalization, or be under 18 when your parents get naturalized. A free ride to citizenship. Nice. Now, naturalization is the VIP entrance to American life, but it takes some work. You need to live in the US for at least 5 years, fill out paperwork, take a citizenship exam. Think US history, but with higher stakes. Sit through interviews, and then swear an oath before a judge to support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States. Sounds dramatic, right? But hey, at the end of it, you get a fancy certificate and all the rights of a natural-born citizen, except you can't run for president. That gig is reserved for those who entered the world as a US citizen. Being a citizen isn't just about rights, it's about responsibilities too. One big one, voting. If you don't, you're basically letting other people pick for you. And do you really trust them? Good citizens also obey laws, serve on juries, yes, even when you'd rather binge-watch TV, and defend the country if needed. Finally, citizenship is more than paperwork. It's about values. Honesty, respect, courage, compassion, and patriotism, which is just a fancy word for loving your country, even when it occasionally annoys you. So, whether you're natural-born or naturalized, being a citizen is about getting involved, staying informed, and making sure the US keeps running smoothly. Because let's face it, democracy works best when everyone pitches in. Recap. After gaining independence, the former American colonies began crafting new state constitutions, establishing a legislative body and an executive to enforce laws, primarily granting voting rights to white landowning men while excluding women and African Americans. The Continental Congress attempted to unify the states under the Articles of Confederation, which ultimately failed due to a lack of taxing power, leading to economic instability and rebellions like Shays' Rebellion that highlighted the need for a stronger national government. This culminated in the 1787 Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, where delegates, including key founding fathers, scrapped the Articles and proposed a new constitution based on principles of checks and balances, separation of powers, and federalism. The debates between Federalists, who advocated for a strong central government, and Anti-Federalists, who feared potential tyranny and demanded a Bill of Rights, eventually led to the ratification of the Constitution in 1788, followed by the Bill of Rights in 1791, ensuring individual freedoms. The Constitution, a living document designed to adapt over time through amendments, establishes the framework of the U.S. government and details citizens' rights and responsibilities, emphasizing participation in democracy as vital for the nation's success. There you have it, folks. That is a Constitution for the United States nutshelled. Thanks for stopping by Nutshelled History. It is a constitutional order for you to smash those like and subscribe buttons for me. Okay, I'll see y'all next time on Nutshelled History.